Hello and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Felicity Thou and I'm a member of the Flippin Pain team. Flippin Pain is a public health campaign aimed at improving understanding of persistent pain, and this event is funded by NHS Black Country Integrated Care Board. The event is being recorded and it'll be emailed to you next week, and it'll also be available for you to share via our YouTube channel. We'll be hearing from Professor Cormac Ryan, our community pain champion, and that'll be followed by a Q&A session that you can get involved with, where we'll be joined by two people who also live with pain and two healthcare professionals. Little bit of housekeeping first, so you'll see a question and answer box on your screen. If you click on that, you'll be able to access the chat box that you can ask your questions in. We can't see or hear you, so you relax and move around as much as you need, and do be aware we can't offer any personal medical advice. Now, you may have heard this before at a Flippin Pain event, but I think it's worth saying again. If you've ever been made to feel otherwise, we'd like to acknowledge that persistent pain is real, it's complex, and it's often distressing. It can make us feel scared, angry, anxious, depressed, isolated, and ultimately not in control. And sadly, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that can add to that feeling. And so our aim tonight is to share the most accurate information there is, so you can start to feel in control again. What you hear tonight won't take away your pain immediately, but it may start you on the right path to reclaiming back your life and reclaiming you. And so I am, first of all, delighted to introduce Professor Cormac Ryan. So over to you, Cormac. I'll just get you to come off mute, Cormac.
No matter how many times I've done this, I still keep the old mute button on. Thanks very much for that introduction. It's a real pleasure and honour to be speaking here to you today. So yes, my name is Cormac Ryan. I'm Professor of Clinical Rehabilitation at Teesside University. I'm also the Community Pain Champion for the Flippin Pain campaign, a physiotherapist and a pain scientist. Next slide, please. Before I begin, I want to quickly declare my conflicts of interest. So I'm a named inventor on a patent for a medical device for the treatment of phantom limb pain. I'm also leased out by Teesside University to be the community pain champion for the Flippin Pain campaign, which is a public health campaign run by Connect Health. So I don't get paid directly for my involvement in the campaign, but my university does. Next slide, please. With all of these conflicts of interest, I had hoped that right about now I'd be sunning myself in some yacht in some Mediterranean port, but unfortunately, next slide please, the reality is not quite as rosy. Next slide please. So to begin, I want to kind of pay homage to the Black Country. What an amazing area it is. I always like to read up on the area I'm kind of going to, whether that's physically or virtually, to look at what they're about and what they've done. And it's really, really impressive when you look at what the Black Country has given to the rest of the world. Starting off with the humble bell on a bike, to a postage stamp, to fire alarms, to the first mobile Hoover. The first weather map came from a chap in the Black Country, and you'd think that he would have been the envy of the family, until of course you find out that his brother-in-law was Charles Darwin. So, you know, he tried as he may, he's probably still being outshone a little. The first computer was developed by Tim Berners-Lee's father, who was from Birmingham. So just amazing, amazing discoveries. Roller skates, Excludo. You'd think that would be enough, but Black Country has more to offer than just this. Next slide, please. We also see amazing athletes and entertainers like Denise Jones, or one of my favorite comedians of all time, Frank Skinner. You know, just remarkable gifts to the rest of the world. But is this it? Is this all the Black Country has? No, it's still got more. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to do before I finished up this part is do a quick, how well do you know the Black Country quiz? So if we push just one on, yeah. So I want you to ask yourself this question and see how well you do in the quiz. Who is the Black Country's most famous civil engineer? Have a think. Okay, and next, push on, please. Some people may recognize the front man from Led Zeppelin. Yes, one of the biggest bands of the world, also a civil engineer and based in the Black Country. Next slide, please. Second question of two. I always like putting this one in because this is one of my absolute favorite songs. Which Black Country born singer wrote? And these are the lines from the song. And that time over at Johnny's place, well, this chick got up and she slapped Johnny's face. Man, we just fell about the place. If that chick don't want to know, forget her. Any guesses? Next slide, please. It was the unforgettable Phil Lynott. So yeah, just I'm in awe of all the things the Black Country has offered us. You know, from inventors, scientists, athletes, performers, absolutely fantastic. So it's, as I say, it's a real pleasure and honor to be speaking to a group from the Black Country today. Next slide, please. So I don't need to tell people on this talk that pain is a huge problem. This is data specifically from the West Midlands, and it's from the Global Burden of Disease study, which looks at the amount of years lived with disability, a way of measuring disability for the different conditions in different areas. And this is specifically to the West Midlands. What we see is if we circle or square, in this case, conditions that are associated with persistent chronic pain, like back pain, osteoarthritis, etc., we see that it contributes to over a quarter, next slide please, of the years lived with disability in this region are attributable to chronic pain conditions. So it's a major problem. Next slide, please. Now, over the past, let's say 20 to 30 years, to try and tackle this problem, the society, the government, the healthcare system have tried numerous biomedical-based interventions to try and tackle it, from a 7-fold increase in scans in some areas. Next slide, please. A 127% increase in opioid use, and this is specifically for England over the past 20 years or so. Next slide, please. And a more than doubling in the rates of surgery for persistent pain conditions such as back pain. Next slide, please. With all of these biomedical interventions being ramped up so much, you would think that we'd begin to see an improvement in the pain situation, but actually we're seeing the reverse. We continue to see an increase in the prevalence of persistent pain conditions like back pain, and an increase in the amount of disability associated with persistent pain. Things aren't improving. We need to take a different approach. We need to look at pain differently. Next slide, please. And that's what we're trying to do here today. So over the past 50 years or so, considerable amount of new information has been gleaned or understood about pain within the scientific community, but very little of that information has trickled through to the person on the street, and as such there are many myths and misconceptions about pain which act as barriers to good management. We believe that knowledge is the key to success. If we can take that scientific information and put it into the hands of the people who need it the most, the person with pain, their friends, their relatives, their healthcare professionals, their employers, we believe we can bust these myths, leading to better pain management for all. Next slide, please. So the campaign is all about changing the way that people think about, talk about, and treat persistent pain. Next slide, please. And we're trying to do that by conveying 6 key messages. That persistent pain is common and can affect anyone. Hurt does not always mean harm. Everything matters when it comes to pain. Medicines and surgeries are often not the answer. Understanding your pain can be key, and recovery is possible. I'm going to go through each of these and break them down in turn. Next slide, please. So before I begin, I want to talk about what the average person on the street thinks about pain, and I want you to reflect on what you think and understand about pain. So when I asked Google to give me a picture of the average man on the street, this is the picture that Google gave me. I can't believe that Google might have a slightly unrealistic picture of what the average man on the street looks like. But nonetheless, I want you to ask yourself these three questions, or these three statements indeed, and ask yourself how much you agree with these three statements. Pain only occurs when you're injured. The greater the injury, the greater the pain will be, and persistent pain means that the injury has not healed. Now, if you fully agree with these statements, give yourself a 0. If you fully disagree with these statements, give yourself a 30. It's 10 for each of these statements. Most people, if you give yourself 10 for each statement, will rest, I would say, somewhere around the sort of 5 or 6 category, and we're trying to push you more towards the 30 category, because these are all myths. These are all misunderstandings. They're what most people understand about pain, but actually they are incorrect. They are misconceptions. And my goal is, when we return to these comments at the end, I'm hoping that you'll have moved away from believing these statements to towards a more informed scientific understanding of pain. Next slide, please. So let's start off with our first key message, that pain is common and can affect anyone. Next slide, please. If you're at the checkout at Tesco's or Asda or wherever, and you've got pain and you look around you, it's easy to think that you're on your own, that no one else is experiencing what you're experiencing, because pain, of course, is invisible and you can feel really, really isolated. But actually, 30 to 50% of people in the UK actually experience persistent pain. One more on, please. And that means that even though you can't see it in the queue, lots of people are sharing your experience. That isolation can actually make the pain worse and can make dealing with the pain worse. So it's really important to know that actually pain doesn't isolate us. If anything, it unites us. It's something that's common to so many people, and you are not alone. Next slide, please. That was one of our first key messages, always our briefest key message. The next key message is that hurt does not always mean harm. So what do I mean by that? Next slide, please. Well, I think it's perfectly exemplified by this case study. So in this case study, which was published in the British Medical Journal in 1995, so one of the most well-respected journals globally, a builder jumped from one platform to the next, and as he did so, a 6-inch nail went up through his boot. He was in absolute agony. He was raced to accident and emergency, where they gave him some really strong painkillers like fentanyl, but it had no effect. They brought him into the operating theatre, removed his boot, or cut off his boot. What they found was, miraculously, the nail had passed between his toes. So there wasn't a scratch on him. He was completely uninjured. But despite this, he had terrible, terrible pain. It's a perfect example of hurt does not necessarily mean harm. You can have terrible pain with little or no tissue injury. And the reverse is true. Next slide, please. This is another case study published in the journal Injury Prevention, a sister journal of the BMJ. In this situation, a gentleman wandered into accident and emergency complaining of dizziness and headaches. When they scanned him, what they found was a knife lodged in his head. It turned out that he had been a little bit tipsy the night before and had fallen over. When he woke up, he couldn't find he could find the handle of his favorite knife, but he couldn't find the blade. No prizes for guessing where it was. They operated on him, and 2 days later, he left the hospital in reasonably good shape. It's a perfect example of how you can have little or no pain at the time, but significant tissue injury. Now, you might be looking at these two situations and go, well, these are people published in academic journals who are not like you and me. They're very different to me. They don't represent me. it's not relevant to me. That's why I always put in this last example. Next slide, please. So this is Flick, who you will have met at the start. She's the compere for today's session. Now, this is her dog, whose name I can never remember, so I'm going to call him Bongo, but I'm sure it's not Bongo. Bongo, she was out walking Bongo. Bongo saw a rabbit. Bongo made a dart for said rabbit. She fell over, and as she did so, she fractured her collarbone. And you can see the x-ray on the side there saying day 1, and you can see a clear fracture. Now, you can ask Flick about this later if you want. She reports that she experienced little or no pain. She did report a crunching and a nausea sensation, but no pain. Perfect example of clear tissue injury, significant harm, but no hurt, little or no pain. Tissue injury and pain are two separate things. They often hang out together, but not always. And over time, they move further apart. Now, how is that possible? Well, it's all to do with our third key message. Next slide, please. That everything matters when it comes to pain. Now, this is the bit I really want you to concentrate on. It's the most challenging bit, this third key message, but it's the most important. So really, we need you to switch on for the next 10 minutes if you can. So everything matters when it comes to pain. Pain is a biopsychosocial experience. It's influenced by biological, psychological, and social things. But I'm not going to talk about pain to communicate this key message first. I'm going to talk about vision and how our visual system works, because everything matters when it comes to what we see. Next slide, please. I want you to take a look at this cube, and I've circled 2 squares. The square at the side should appear orange, and the square at the top should appear brown. You should see 2 different colored squares. Now, next slide, please. What happens when I throw this white sheet over it and just expose those 2 squares is that actually we see that both of those squares are actually brown. They're actually both the same color. Now, I can guarantee you that I haven't doctored this in any way. In both of those pictures, the side square was brown and the top square indeed was brown, but the side square appears to change color. If we go back 1, we can see that it looks orange. If we can go back 1, can we go back 1? Yay, here we go. It looks orange, and now if we go forward again, that side square appears brown. It is an illusion. Now, how does this work? Next slide, please. Lovely. Okay, so it's all to do with how our visual system works. Light reflects off images in the surrounding area, goes in through the lens of our eye, and is projected onto the retina, the back of the eye. There, it stimulates a number of rods and cones, little receptors which convert that light energy to electrical energy and send it up the optic nerve to the part of the brain that deals with vision. Now, I want you to imagine that in there is a little girl called Sheila. Sheila is surrounded by millions of jigsaw puzzle pieces. She uses those jigsaw puzzle pieces to create in real time an image of what she believes to be going on around you. And that is what you see. What you see is not necessarily what is there. It is your unconscious brain's interpretation of what is there. It is your Sheila's interpretation of what is there, 100% of the time, all of the time. Of course, light influences the jigsaw puzzle that Sheila creates, but she's also influenced by your previous experiences, your expectations, your beliefs, your attitudes. Everything matters when it comes to what you see. Now, if we go forward again, take that information and bring it into this illusion. If we look to the left of this cube, we'll see a dark area suggesting that there's shadow there. And then that would also suggest that there is a light source the other side of the cube. Now, there is not. This is just a 2D image that's been drawn to create that impression. But it's a 2D image. It doesn't actually give off a shadow. But Sheila's designed to handle 3D objects. She's not used to dealing with 2D. She's not evolved to handle 2D. So she takes into account this apparent shadow and light. So when we know that both of those two squares that are circled are the same color. They are both actually brown. The same amount of light energy is reflecting off both of those squares, going in through our eyes, going up to our Sheilas. And Sheila would usually say, same amount of light energy, must be the same color, and she would create two brown squares. However, everything matters when it comes to what we see. Sheila says, well, the side square is in a shadowy, shaded area, darker area. If I'm getting the same amount of light energy from that square and it's in a darker area, it must be, in reality, brighter than the square at the top. So she assumes or predicts that it is an orange square, and thus that is the image that Sheila creates for us. And we all see an orange and a brown square. Now, if we go forward one more slide, we put over our white image. Now, Sheila no longer has to adjust for the impact or the effect of the shadow. She just gets light information from both squares. She gets the same amount of light energy from both of them. She thus predicts that they're both the same color, both brown, and that's the image that she creates for us. In other words, what you see is not necessarily what you get. It is your subconscious brain's interpretation of what is there 100% of the time, all of the time. And that's perfectly illustrated by these illusions. Next slide, please. Now, I want all our senses work in this way. Vision, hear, what we taste, what we smell, what we touch, even all of them are creations of our subconscious mind. I want you to start thinking about pain in the same way. Start thinking about pain as a sense. Pain is a creation of our subconscious mind. It is influenced by a variety of factors, of course. So let me introduce you to Assumpta. So this is Assumpta here. She is Sheila's first cousin on her mother's side. She's the part of the brain that deals with pain. She's like our brain's Department of Health and Safety. And I like to depict her as Lady Justice with her blindfold and her weighing scales. When Assumpta receives danger messages, just like Sheila receives light information, when Assumpta receives danger messages, Assumpta asks the question, how dangerous is this really? And she weighs up the safety and the threat. If on balance, she believes that the tissues are in danger, she will want to draw attention to it and get something done about it. And thus, to achieve that, she will produce pain. In contrast, if on balance, Assumpta believes the situation is not dangerous, she will not want to draw your attention to it, and she will not want to get you to do something about it, and thus she won't produce pain. It's as easy and as difficult to get your head around as that. Next slide, please. So what scientific evidence do I have to convince you that Assumpta exists? Well, there's lots and lots of studies which demonstrate this. However, my favorite one is this one that was published by Irene Tracy, who's like the Ed Sheeran of the pain science world. And in this study, I like to think the setup was a little bit like this scene from Goldfinger in James Bond. Participants were asked to lie on a plinth, and a laser was shone on to one of three areas on their foot. The laser was shone onto area 1, and all the scientists in the room went, yep, that's absolutely fine, that's nice and safe, we can use that for the rest of the study. They then shone the laser onto area 2, just beside area 1, and they all went, ooh, no, we can't use that. That's not a safe area to shine the light onto. It is very, very thin, the skin there. It could result in a burn. We can't use the laser on that area. They then shone the laser onto area 3, and they all went, we think this area is sufficiently safe. We're not 100% sure, so we're going to monitor it very closely, but we think we can use this area, area 3, for the rest of the study. They then, over the next hour, shone the laser 120 times onto either area 1, the safe area, or area 3, the potentially unsafe area. Each time they asked the participant to say whether they experienced pain or not, and if they did experience pain, to say how much pain they experienced on a scale of 1 to 10. So what were the results? Next slide, please. What they found was when the laser was shone onto the high threat area, participants were more likely to report the stimulus as painful compared to when it was shone onto the low threat area. What's more, when it was produced pain in the high threat area, the pain was rated as higher compared to when it produced pain in the low threat area. Now, what they didn't tell participants until the end, of course, is that there was absolutely no difference between area 1 and area 3. Both areas were perfectly safe. The only difference was the person's belief that one area was safe and one set of stimuli were potentially dangerous. That was enough to influence the pain experience. Now, this is key. What this shows is that what we believe influences our pain experience. It doesn't just influence how we respond to pain. It influences whether we experience pain or not and how much pain we experience. So our beliefs, our understanding is really, really important. Next slide, please. So let's try and break down this into sort of the biology of it, just very, very briefly. Next slide, please. Imagine you are hanging up a picture frame, and instead of hitting the nail, you hit your thumb. And this causes a danger message to be sent down the first nerve, which goes from your thumb all the way to your spinal cord. When it reaches there, it passes this danger message on to the second order nerve. Now you'll see that I'm using the term danger message, not pain messages, because there are no such thing as pain receptors. They don't exist. We have danger receptors which pass on danger messages. And when this danger message goes from the first nerve to the second nerve, it's passed on across a little gap that exists between the first and second nerve called the synaptic gap. And the information is passed on using little red chemicals or chemical messengers called neurotransmitters, which passes on the message danger in the thumb up to the second nerve, which is sent all the way up to the part of the brain that deals with pain, all the way up to Assumpta. And Assumpta asks the question, how dangerous is this really? Remember, this all happens in a split second out with your conscious awareness. And Assumpta says, how dangerous is this really? And she weighs up the situation. She says, right, well, he's doing DIY. He always injures himself when he's doing DIY. He's got a hammer in the other hand. Good chance he's just smacked this thumb, where we're getting all the danger messages from, with the hammer, and he's in backswing, so he's likely going to keep hitting it again. We really need to draw attention to it and get something done about it, because we need that thumb. It's vital for everything we do, from picking up a cup to going to work. We need to draw attention to it, get something done about it ASAP. How do we do that? Let's produce pain, lots of it, in the area which we think is in danger. And thus pain is created. At this point, the conscious you becomes aware of the problem. You handsome devil, you. Now, Assumpta has enormous control over the biology of this system. Remember, you don't have that control, but Assumpta does. If Assumpta believes the situation is more dangerous than the amount of danger messages coming up would suggest, she can send down excitatory messages, which actually increase the amount of danger messages going up that second nerve, creating a positive feedback loop. And so Assumpta receives even more danger messages. If she receives more danger messages, she's likely to believe the situation is even more dangerous. More need to draw your attention to it and get you to do something about it. There's more need to produce pain. In contrast, if Assumpta believes the situation is less dangerous, she can send down inhibitory messages. These inhibitory messages can block the activity of those neurotransmitters, reducing the amount of danger messages coming up to assumpta. If assumpta receives fewer danger messages, she's likely to believe the situation is less dangerous, therefore less need to draw your attention to it, get you to do something about it, and thus less need to produce pain. Now, that was all very much in the short term. What about the longer term? Next slide, please. Imagine that you go to the doctor. He says, okay, well, I'm not sure, it could be a fracture. Let's go and send you to A&E to get an x-ray. You get an x-ray. They say, oh, it's a bit swollen, so it's hard to see. We don't think there's any bony injury. Should be all right in 2 or 3 weeks. Here's some time off work. Off you go. 2 weeks later, you go back to your GP, say, this hasn't, this is actually, not getting better at all. It feels just as bad, if not a little worse. So GP says, okay, well, maybe they missed something. So he sends you back to A&E to do another scan. This time they're fairly confident. They say, no, there's no bony injury, just some soft tissue damage. We'll give you another 2 or 3 weeks off work, and the situation repeats itself. However, one month further down the line, you're still experiencing pain, and that pain increases over time. 6 months down the line, you're still off work. Your finger, your thumb is as sore as ever, and actually the pain is beginning to spread. Now goes up your wrist, up towards your elbow. It started to move or grow. Does any of this sound familiar to you in terms of that pattern of the pain getting bigger and more over a wider area, moving? If it does, that suggests that your pain has become supercharged, and that's what happens in chronic or persistent pain. The process by which this happens is, next slide, please. These neurotransmitters that we talked about, these gaps and this pathway system, basically lots of danger messages want to be sent, but the system doesn't have capacity to send them all. It's a little bit like the post office at Christmas time that can't manage to send all the messages. So what does the post office do? It recruits more staff, and it gets them to work longer hours. And our pain alarm system does something not too dissimilar. A number of chemical changes occur, which mean that this pathway becomes more sensitive and better at sending messages. And then on top of that, these chemical changes that occur in that pathway spill over into neighboring pathways. And as such, it gives the sensation that the pain moves or gets bigger. It's a little bit akin to, imagine your house was on fire. You might call your neighbors and say, come grab a bucket, come and help me put it out. Your pain alarm system does something quite similar. It looks for help because it believes your tissues are in danger, and thus it asks neighboring pathways to come and help. And their way of helping is by sending more danger messages and producing more pain. Next slide, please. Thus, you get a sensitized alarm system. Okay, now there's loads of ways we can communicate this sensitized alarm system, but often through story and metaphor is one of the best ways of doing it. This is a story that I often tell, which I find that really helps people to better understand that sensitized pain you get with persistent pain. So imagine you have a brand new car. You love this car. You drive it up to work, you park it outside, and you go up your 4 flights of stairs and you start typing away. 2 minutes later, just from the side, burglar looks out, says, I'm going to have that car radio. He runs over, breaks the window, grabs the car radio, and then runs off down the street. 2 minutes later, car alarm goes off. You jump up, you look out your window, you shout, oi, but he's long gone. You go down your 4 flights of stairs, you call the police, you call the RAC, police come, take a statement, the RAC come, they replace your car window, replace your car radio. Then the guy says, I'm going to give you a little tip. I'm going to turn up the sensitivity of your alarm system. Now, the next time someone tries to mess with your car, they're going to get a rude awakening. You say, thanks very much. Back up your 4 flights of stairs, start typing away. Meanwhile, same burglar looks out from behind the same bushes, says, I'm going to have that car radio too. Runs over, grabs and as soon as he touches the car, bang, car alarm goes off. He gets spooked. You jump up from your seat, you look out, You see the whites of his eyes and you shout, "Oi!" He gets even more spooked. He runs off down the road. You go down your 4 flights of stairs and you are delighted to find that your car is completely untouched. It's in perfect condition and you thank your lucky stars for that RAC guy. You turn off the alarm, which will leave the sensitivity right up because it's doing such a wonderful job keeping your car safe. You go back up your 4 flights of stairs and you start typing away. 2 minutes later, car alarm goes off again. You jump up, you look out. What you see is an elderly couple have just walked past your car and just glanced off it. Now, your car was in no danger, but that glance was enough to set off the car alarm, and the alarm sounds just like it did when the window was broken. You go down your 4 flights of stairs, you turn off the alarm, which will leave the sensitivity right up because it's doing such an awesome job keeping your car safe. Back up your 4 flights of stairs, you start typing away. 2 minutes later, car alarm goes off again. You look out, you see this huge pigeon sitting on your car, obviously a deaf pigeon because the alarm hasn't scared it away. You go down your 4 flights of stairs and you shoo it away before it does business on your car. You turn off the alarm, which will leave the sensitivity right up because it's doing such a great job keeping your car safe. Back up your 4 flights of stairs, you start typing away. 2 minutes later, car alarm goes off again. Your problem is no longer the broken window. It's no longer the stolen radio and it's no longer the burglar. The problem is this sensitized alarm system. And whilst it is doing a brilliant job keeping your car safe, it's stopping you from doing all the things you need to do throughout the day to carry on with the business of life. Persistent pain works in a similar type of way. That pain is due to the sensitized alarm system. It does a brilliant job keeping your tissues safe. You're so sore that you can't do anything that could even remotely come close to injuring it. However, the downside is that even normal everyday things hurt. And so it stops you from getting on with all the things that you need and want to do in your life. Hopefully that's helped you to see some of these, what we're trying to say about this sensitized alarm system with persistent pain. Hopefully it communicates that pain is a marker of perceived threat. It's not so much due to tissue damage, chronic pain, but increased sensitivity of our body's natural alarm system, because the purpose of pain is to protect you. I'll say that again. The purpose of pain is to protect you. It's not about detection. It's about protection. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. There we go. You might ask yourself, why are we designed this way? Why does it not just hurt when we injure ourselves? And that's a perfectly valid question to ask. What I would say is have a think about reverse sensors on your car. Think about what a clever design they are. Imagine if those reverse sensors only started beeping after you hit the wall behind you. That wouldn't be a very clever system at all. Much better that it kicks in before you hit the wall. And that's how our pain alarm system works. Okay, now positive, accurate information can dampen down the sensitivity of that alarm system. In contrast, negative, inaccurate information can actually fan the flames, increase the sensitivity of that alarm system. Next slide, please. And that's beautifully illustrated by this next example. So this comes from the world of back pain, primarily because much of the research is done in back pain, but it is relevant to pain of all different locations and areas. When we scan someone with persistent back pain, we increase the likelihood that they're going to have a poor outcome. I'm going to say that again. When we scan someone with persistent lower back pain, we increase the risk of them having a poorer outcome. How is that possible? Well, let's think through the scenario. Imagine you're a 50-year-old guy, you've got back pain, you pop to your GP, you say just that. GP says, okay, well, why don't we send you for a quick scan? Go for the scan comes back, he says, look, there you are, you've got disc degeneration. That's your problem. Now, what do you think when you get told your pain is due to disc degeneration? Does that sound like a good thing or a bad thing? What are the words that immediately spring to mind when you hear the word degeneration? I know for many it brings up things like bone on bone, wear and tear, not going to recover, going to get worse, could end up in a wheelchair, all sorts of negative connotations. How scary does that sound? How dangerous does that sound? It might increase your pain-related fear and anxiety, but it will certainly increase Assumpta's pain-related fear and anxiety. Assumpta's going to want to protect you even more. How does she do that? She increases the amount of pain because that's her tool to try and protect you. Now, what we don't tell people as clinicians is the full story, and that's what this little table on the right gives, which was published by Brinjitji in 2015. I suspect I'm murdering that pronunciation, but nonetheless. In this table, what we see is the percentage of imaging findings for the different age categories, 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., in individuals who have absolutely no back pain whatsoever. They're asymptomatic. They have experienced no pain whatsoever. And I've highlighted the 50-year-old category. If we look at the top line, look at disc degeneration. 80%, it's 8 out of 10 people with no back pain whatsoever have disc degeneration on scan. What that tells us is that these are not necessarily pathological changes. They are the kisses of time. They are wrinkles. They are grey hairs. They are normal age-related changes. However, that's not what we're told. That's not how they're conveyed. And that's because healthcare professionals only scan people with back pain. So if you only scan people with back pain and then you get a scan back saying that they've got disc degeneration, you make the assumption wrongly that that's what's causing their pain. What you don't tell people is that that actually this is a non-specific finding, and that if we scan someone the same age and the same general profile, but with no pain whatsoever, we get the same picture. Now, that's beautifully illustrated in this next clip by a chap called Pete Moore. Some of you may be familiar with Pete Moore. Pete is a person with pain, and he was the guy who developed the Pain Toolkit, which is a brilliant self-management tool online. But this was recorded way before he did any of that. And it talks about the inner monologue of the scan and how negative it can be. Next slide, please.
I did actually get to have an MRI scan, and it showed up that I'd degeneration of the discs in my lower back. It's the two lower vertebrae and one in the centre. What they've shown is more or less like bone was sort of rubbing on bone, really. So, okay, but the words they use, okay, I guess at the time frightened me. They use this word degeneration. I was thinking, God, well, if I've got something degenerative, and I better just be really careful what I do. So again, I had this thinking, well, if I've got something degenerated, I better not be too active in case I wear things out even more. And they also told me that when they showed me this, they said, oh, your spine is like a digestive biscuit. Again, you know, I thought if I move at all, I may make things worse. But by not moving, as I found out later on, I was making things a little bit worse, because I was becoming more and more deconditioned.
Next slide, please. Imagine telling a person their spine is like a digestive biscuit. What a terrible example to give. The clinician couldn't even use a robust biscuit like a hobnob, something with a bit of steel behind it. Poor old Pete must have just been avoiding cups of tea in case the spine magically dissolved. It was a perfect example of a negative, inaccurate piece of information, which had subsequent negative consequences. And that's how these scans bring about this negative impact. Actually, if we give people positive, accurate information, if we convey alongside the scans, actually, that these are normal age-related changes and that they're not necessarily pathological, we can actually remove the negative effect of the scan. It's not the scan itself that's the negative problem. It's what people are told about the scan, which can increase fear and worry and anxiety associated with it and increase the pain. Next slide, please. Everything matters, essentially, when it comes to pain. A Assumpta weighs up safety and threat. And what I've done here is imagine all the different threat scenarios that could be encountered. Next slide, please. We think about this is just an example of a variety of different threats that I could think of. Some may be relevant to you, some may not be. All of these can increase the threat level and increase the sensitivity of that alarm system. But what if we could flip each of these and begin to make them more safe for safety measures? Next slide, please. What if we changed the not knowing towards more understanding your pain? What if we looked at things like low self-esteem and thought to yourself, well, actually think about all the things you've achieved despite your pain. Think about you coming and trying to understand more about your pain rather than just taking a sort of a passive approach to it. These are things that should increase your self-esteem. Previous traumatic experiences can influence our pain alarm system. Perhaps seeking help to process some of those traumatic experiences. Stress and anxiety can increase the sensitivity of that alarm system. But maybe if we took up things like mindfulness and relaxation, it may help to reduce the sensitivity of that alarm system. Feeling financially insecure. This always blows my mind. Feeling financially insecure can increase the sensitivity of that alarm system. The threat doesn't have to be specific to the area. It can be a more wider threat. If you figure out how to reduce feelings of feeling financially insecure, please come and let me know, because I'd like that myself. Being in a negative relationship can actually increase the sensitivity of that alarm system. So try and reach out and build on the positive relationships if you can. Ethnicity, age, gender. If you are someone from an ethnic minority, an older adult, and a lady, it all increases the sensitivity of your alarm system. Now, there's some things you can't change, and why would you want to change? Because those things come with lots of positives as well. But from a pain alarm system, they can increase that sensitivity. Low mood and depression. Make time for yourself. These things can increase the sensitivity of that alarm system. Feeling isolated and alone, which we mentioned, reach out, reconnect, try and make your world bigger. Not feeling listened to can be a real problem. Tell your story, tell it clearly to those people around you. Not feeling believed, we'll come back to what Flick said at the start, all pain is real. Hopelessness can have a negative effect. But remember, recovery is possible. We're going to talk about that later. This comes back to that end of that key message that everything matters when it comes to pain. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we've got two key messages. Oh, we've got three key messages left. I'm going to try and race through these as quickly as possible. Medicines and surgeries are often not the answer. Next slide, please. If we think about fire, fire is noxious, it's awful, it's hot, and everyone wants to kind of get away from it, and everyone wants to put it out. But the fire extinguisher you use to put it out is important, because if you choose the wrong one, it can make the fire actually worse. So for example, if it's an electrical fire, if you use water on it, it'll just make the thing worse. So similar to fire, pain is noxious. It's awful. We all want to get away from it, regardless of what's causing it. None of us want to push it away. Next slide, please. But just like fire, we need to choose our treatments dependent on what is causing the pain. So for acute pain, opioids can be really, really useful. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, please give me lots of opioids. If I have surgery tomorrow, please give me lots of opioids. In the short acute period after trauma like that, opioids can be really, really effective. However, in the longer term, for longer term pain, they are ineffective. They do not work. That's because the mechanism causing the pain has shifted away from that tissue injury model towards a sensitized alarm system, and opioids work poorly on that type of pain. That is why the evidence-based guidelines encourage us to move away from using opioids for persistent pain. Next slide, please. And that's what all the guidelines tell us to do. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, what we see is actually an increase happening in opioid use, despite what the evidence says. Next slide, please. And if we look at the West Midlands specifically, you guys do a pretty good job. The red line is the West Midlands, it's the Black Country area, and the blue either side is a spread of opioid use in different counties throughout the UK. And you'll see your kind of mid-table respectability, which is brilliant. Next slide, please. However, there's lots of room to get better. For example, 7% of patients prescribed opioids are prescribed high doses, way above what they should be getting. And furthermore, 99% of patients on those high doses have been on them for 3 months or more, much longer than they should be. So there's plenty of room for improvement. Next slide, please. Like the last 2 key messages, understanding your pain is key and recovery is possible. Next slide, please. This is data that's given to me by Professor Lorimer Mosley, who's based down in Australia, and I'll talk about him later. This is people going through his clinic. All of them receive pain education, not too dissimilar to this, but they also receive a smorgasbord of active physical and psychological therapies. A range of different pain conditions, from back pain to endometriosis to everything in between. On average, they've got pain a 5 out of 10, and they've had it for about 6 years. Next slide, please. What they've found is those people who flip their understanding of pain away from the biomedical hurt means harm towards more biopsychosocial hurt does not necessarily mean harm understanding. After about a month, their pain is unchanged, but at 6 months, it's improved a little, and at 1 year, it improves quite substantially. In contrast to this, if we look at those who have not flipped their understanding, next slide, please, what we see is their pain levels remain relatively static. Now, what does this tell us? One, it shows that pain can change. Recovery is possible. We see almost 50% of the participants improving. The second thing it tells us is that understanding your pain can help with that recovery. Now, we must remember that there may have been other things which influence that, but it's food for thought. It gives us a suggestion that understanding can be really, really helpful. Next slide, please. And finally, when we talk about recovery, I'm talking about recovery being different for different people. So in the context of our key message, for some people, recovery means a reduction in their pain. For others, it means being able to go back to work despite their pain. For others, it means being able to just feel better in themselves despite their pain. It's different for different people. Next slide, please. Okay, so next slide, please. And next slide, please. So when I showed this presentation to my neighbor, she said, that's brilliant information. So what do I do with it next? What's the next on my journey? Well, what I'd say is learn more about your pain. Learn as much as you can. Next slide, please. Find a good individual. That could be someone with persistent pain who's managing it better, or it could be a healthcare professional, to help you to chart your path to recovery. And one way to think about doing it, next slide please, is to think about all those different things we know influence pain. And what if we began to address each of those one at a time? There are things, of course, we can't change, like our genetics. But for example, what if we talked about anxiety and stress? What if we approached mindfulness and meditation to try and reduce the anxiety and stress? Next slide, please. What if we improved our diet by eating more fruit and veg and oily fish? Next slide, please. What if we improved our sleep through good sleep hygiene strategies? Next slide, please. What if we broadened our social support, reached out and reconnected to those connections? And what about our physical activity levels? What if we began to slowly increase those in a nice graded way? We can begin to reduce the sensitivity over time of that alarm system. Next slide, please. So coming back, next slide, please, to those 3 messages. Pain only occurs when you are injured. The greater the injury, the greater the pain will be. Persistent pain means that your injury is not healed. I want you to think about those, reflect on those. Hopefully you now really disagree with those statements, because they are all misconceptions and misunderstandings. Next slide, please. Those are our 6 key messages. Next slide, please. And before I finish up, I just want to thank the Pain Revolution, who are a sister organisation down in Australia, who very much started the ball rolling, and we're grabbing onto their coattails. Very generous with all the materials they've given us and support they've given us, and we really, really appreciate it. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to thank all those involved in the Flippin Pain campaign, from our director, Richard Pell, to all the people with pain who contribute, all the clinicians who contribute, or the scientists and the illustrators. And that's it for me. Thank you very, very much for listening.
Thank you, Cormac. Brilliant. So before we head to our panel discussion, just a reminder, you can put any questions that you might have in the Q&A box. So get those lined up. And while you do, I'm going to come to each of our panelists individually to introduce themselves, give it a bit of background. So first up, in a slight change due to illness, we have Fen Kipley, who's very kindly stepped into Nikki's shoes. So Fen, I shall hand over to you to introduce yourself a little.
Hello there. Thanks everybody for attending. I hope you really got some benefit from Cormac's presentation. My name's Fen and I have lived with persistent pain for about 18 years now. And I have tried my best to overcome the pain through looking at all those aspects that Cormac's just mentioned, looking at my social interactions with people, making sure I'm not got too much stress in the background with domestic issues, and also making sure that I'm, keeping up to date with my healthcare professionals. And we're looking at ways to help improve the pain management, so the pain isn't dominant in my life anymore like it used to be, and it's really much in the background, and it's kind of a little niggle now. That's all it is. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Fen. I'll also come to Claire Rawson, who also lives with pain. Claire, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi, thank you everyone for attending. I've lived with pain now for well over 20 years. I was first told at the age of 18, if I'm not in a wheelchair by the time I'm 40, I'm doing well. I'm currently 43, still, I won't say terribly fit or healthy, but not in a wheelchair, still able to work full time, basically using mindful techniques, heavy opioids at one time, been weaning myself off those with healthcare professionals, and then since stumbling across Flippin Pain, hopefully some of you guys out there have done the same, just scrolling through Facebook. I only did this Q&A session myself a few months ago, and it's made a huge difference to my life. Just rethinking, I thought I knew it all. I've been in as a patient for over 20 years, spent 1.5 hours with Cormac and the team up at the YMCA in West Brom, and on my life, I know nothing. I'm re-educating myself. Hope this can help other people out there. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Brilliant to hear, Claire, thank you. We've also got a pain physiotherapist, Rebecca Elijah Smith. Rebecca, I'll come to you.
Hello, thank you, and hello everybody, and thank you for attending today. So yes, I'm a pain physiotherapist. I work in City and Sandwell hospitals, and I've been working with people with persistent pain for the last 25 years. So hopefully I can help answer some questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. Cheers. And finally, we have Dr. Deepak Ravindran. Deepak, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Thank you all for coming and listening to Cormac and Flippin Pain, the talk there. My name is Deepak. I'm one of the pain specialists and consultants working in actually down south. I'm in the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading, and thank you for having me on the panel today, and look forward to supporting you in any way I can.
Thanks very much, Deepak. If you do have a question for Deepak, get that in early, because he has to get away a little earlier than the end of the webinar. So get those questions in as soon as you can. I'll come first, because that's an interesting story that you mentioned, Claire. It wasn't too long ago we were in the West Midlands in a face-to-face event. It was at the end of September. And as you say, you were an audience member then. Would you be happy to share your experience a little bit about what your thought process was, what has happened since?
Yeah, totally. I live in Walsall. I've lived in Birmingham for all of my life. I attended Sandwell pain management course many years ago. I must say, for those local to the area, if you can access it, do. It was one of the best courses I've done. We had physiotherapists with us, we had mindfulness with us, absolutely great. And then one day, only a couple of months ago, scrolling through Facebook, I'm in many surviving chronic pain groups, fibromyalgia groups, depression groups, all of the support groups on Facebook, for those that use it, they are there. And up, of course, good old algorithms, popped Flippin Pain. Scrolling through, thought fairly local to me, sounds a bit different. Let's go see what they've got to say. Let's see if I've heard it all before and if it's rehashed jargon. Everybody was so lovely when I first arrived. Cormac started speaking. I know about phantom pain, who hasn't heard of the missing limb syndrome? I was like, yeah, I've heard all of this before, keep going. And just as the seminar slowly ticked on, I don't know what connected in my Assumpta, between Sheila and Assumpta connected. And by the end of it, I just walked out in a fantastic haze thinking, wow, I've never heard this in the 20 plus years I've been going to see healthcare practitioners, physios, all different pain managements. I've done chiropractor. I think the only thing I haven't tried yet is acupuncture because I'm too scared. I don't like needles. And it's just, I had to contact the team straight afterwards to say, look, this was amazing. I've been off most of my painkillers now for over 4 weeks. I'm reviewing some of the other medications I've been put on repeat year after year after year. I just taken because that's what I was told. So I'm revisiting with doctors and other healthcare professionals because, can't go cold turkey. Do not do that. Speak to your healthcare professional and just seeing if I can reduce anything, the mindful set, the mindness, the brain fog clearing out. It's great. Thank you.
That's brilliant to hear, Claire. And I want to come to Cormac to say, are you a magician or can you explain this with science?
Yes, I am a magician. That's the only thing
I thought so.
Claire's story is a wonderful story, and it really does my heart good to hear it because it illustrates the power of the information that we're giving here. But we're not really doing anything more than providing the information and I guess opening the door. Claire then walked through it, as it were. She used that information to its optimum, both on a conscious and an unconscious level. On a conscious level, you have to actually go. You actually have to go and seek out this information and try it out and listen to it with an open mind, I guess. And then on an unconscious level, what I would surmise is that Assumpta heard this information and she linked into those belief systems and perhaps said, right, well, okay, perhaps this is not as dangerous as we first thought. And she has a tremendous amount of power to reduce the sensitivity of that alarm system if she feels safer. And that is how I would it's either that or the magic, one or the other. It's hard to say.
Excellent, brilliant. I have a question from a healthcare professional, which I'm going to put to Deepak, but then I also would be great to get Claire and Fenn's experience because I know both of you have used opioids in the past. So we have a question: how do we start weaning patients from their opioids, particularly if they're hesitant? And understandably, you might be hesitant, particularly if the opioid is working well for your pain, or you're worried about what the consequences are of it not being there. Deepak, what's your experience, and what would you advise a fellow healthcare professional when it comes to weaning from opioids?
Actually, two separate things. Great question, Flick, for whoever has asked there. I think there are two aspects to this. I just had a patient this afternoon who was exactly in that frame of mind where they were quite keen to reduce their opioids and wanted some advice on what could be the alternatives and what could they do to bring down the opioids because they were experiencing side effects that they did not like or want to be. That's a great place for a patient and a healthcare professional to find themselves in because both of them have a similar goal in mind. But when patients are concerned but do not know how to go about doing it, I think it's the responsibility of the healthcare professional to be aware of all the alternative options that are available in the local area, and then to have a very considered and what we call a shared decision-making approach. I think one of the concerns that came out from the NICE guidelines of earlier last year was that if opioids are dangerous and not to be prescribed, then are people going to be taken off them if they are doing well on the drugs? And I think that's not true. What is absolutely true is we should have a more careful discussion with the patient, find out if they are confident enough to reduce the medication, do they want to reduce it, and are they aware of other alternatives they could use instead of the opioids, not just drugs, but other non-drug techniques. And I think they would need that support and understanding before the healthcare professional and the patient embark on that journey. And it's a journey. It's not something that can be done in a week or that it is going to happen in everyone in 3 weeks. Each person is different, and we need to be prepared for at least a 3 to 6 month journey of gradually titrating down the opioid.
I just lost Deepak there for a second. But thank you, Deepak. I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you for that answer. It's really, really thorough. I think you were just getting to the end of it. Well, oh, yeah, I think you're back. We lost you just towards... Hello, Deepak, sorry, we lost you just towards the end there.
Yeah, it wasn't planned. It was not this one at all. And I don't know who cut it off there. But yeah, no, I don't know where I got cut off there, Flick. I just want to say that it's a journey that a healthcare professional and a patient must be ready to embark on for a little while if they want to do reduction of opioids in a safe and appropriate manner. Brilliant.
Thank you very much. Fen, I'll come to you as somebody who's used opioids in the past. Are you happy to share a little bit about your experience of weaning off them, or are you still using them?
Yes, thank you, Flick. And yes, it is a great question. And Deepak, obviously, given the healthcare professional point of view, which is, should be absolutely followed. I think the important thing is, I know for me, just all I ever thought about, lived through was my pain. I never had any other distraction. I gave up my job, I gave up my friends, I gave up everything because pain was just completely overwhelming me. And actually, from all the opioids that I was actually taking, the side effects were the worst factor. I was then having to take other drugs like things to stop the acid reflux, all kinds of things to stop the headaches, etc. I was taking more drugs than the opioids to deal with the side effects. But it came to the fact that I realised that was the problem. It was the amount of drugs I was taking and the language that I was using myself around the opioid use. And when I was in the waiting room, everybody in the waiting room was talking about their pain, and they were talking about how much pain they were in. And it was kind of like a one-upmanship. Oh, well, I'm on this opioid. Well, I'm on a much stronger opioid than you. And it was quite triggering, I think is the correct word they use these days. And so I thought, well, this isn't right. And I don't feel right. I don't feel like me anymore. Because all I'm doing is just living in this opioid fog. That's all I could say it was. And then we kind of working with a healthcare professional that actually works specifically in mindfulness and looking about what else is in your environment, what else you're doing. And I wasn't really doing anything. I was just thinking about my pain all the time. And so we worked on, well, what can we do so you're not thinking about your pain all the time? And I started doing wildlife gardening. And the good thing about wildlife gardening is you don't have to do a lot. It's wildlife to do for you. But the fact of going out there each day, out of those four walls, stopped me thinking about my pain. I was only able to do a little bit, but the more I enjoyed it, the more I felt less in pain, if that makes sense. And then we talked about, right, now you're not feeling your pain so much. Can we look at how much opioids you are taking? And that's when we started the journey. And it is a journey that's really important. It's not finish one day and that's great. It doesn't work that way. And it was a long journey, but it was a shared decision. It was me making small, very small steps, making my environment different, if you like, making my social interaction with people different, and stopped talking about drugs all the time and started talking about me and what I wanted out of life and making connections with other people, making connections, in my case, with wildlife and getting out in the green space was a drug for me, but a drug that wasn't harmful. It was actually beneficial. But the gentle journey with a healthcare professional to think about different things that took my mind off the pain helped me get off the opioids. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Fen. Claire, would you like to add anything about your experience with opioids and weaning from them?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. My thing's not showing, it's unmuted. Perfect.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Fen. I was on opioids for well over 15 years. Had cocodamol on repeat prescription at quite a high strength. Much to the horror of a change of doctors when I moved into Walsall, and of course had to change medical practice. They were horrified that I was just able to order as many as I liked, when I liked, as often as I liked. And it was only at their horror did I realise, is this not normal? But continued to take them because it helped with my brain fog. It helped, I thought, with my pain and with my day-to-day life. It just became part of taking every other medication. Pop 2 in the pot to take in the morning, take 2 to work, 2 at tea time, 2 before I go to bed because it helps me sleep. And this pattern just evolved, that it just became almost as as addictive as my morning coffee. I thought, well, oh no, I haven't taken my painkillers this morning. What am I going to do? I've gone out without them for I'm off to the cinema on a rare occasion. I haven't taken any with me. What do I do? My life just started evolving around, when am I due to take them? Do I take them now? Do I take them before I go out? Do I take them while I'm out? So I phoned the doctors. I was at a very low peak. Just one of those horrible days that hopefully some of you guys won't understand, and some of you will, that I phoned my doctors literally in tears. I just couldn't cope any longer. I was just really, really in a bad state. To be told on a medication review, well, if they're working for you, keep taking them. And at that point, I hung up the phone on them, cried my eyes out, straightened up as much as I could with my back crying in pain, and said, no, I'm in charge of my life. I'm in charge of what I'm doing here. This is not the answer. I want something different. So I reached out to a fantastic group local to Walsall. Mindfulness, again, it really is actually a key. I don't, I'm not a crystal ball healer, I'm nothing like that, but it worked for me. Ben, I can see you nodding slightly in the background there. There is something behind it, definitely. And between working with themselves, me going back to my doctors and basically saying, your answer wasn't good enough the first time round, I want to come off these, you are going to help me. They then decided, actually, you are right, Claire, let's start working on this. I now haven't taken any opioids for well over 4 weeks. I'm still working at it. They're still in the drawer. They do say, reach for something else first, go slower, lower, see if you can get away with it. Just take 2 minutes out of your day, put in some headphones, listen to a breathing app, see if that works for you first, and then go from there. Like Cormac said, if you hit your hand with a hammer, a few choice words often works a lot better than a plaster. It's very, very true.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you both for sharing. I'll come to Rebecca as well. As a pain, you often have a role in kind of filling the gap between the medication gap once that medication is gone. Have you anything to add from your experience about opioids?
Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of reinforce the messages, is that actually if we're going to reduce pain medication, it's important that we're replacing that with other techniques, other tools that patients can use. Things like you've talked about, mindfulness, relaxation, distraction. There are lots of other non-medical tools that hopefully you'll be able to access through, I don't know, through physiotherapy, through pain management services, through our self-management programs, but just wanted to kind of reinforce it's really important we did give other tools in place of the medication, and not just remove the medication without giving patients any other information or techniques to use. And my other thought was just around kind of sometimes the pharmacists, either your local pharmacist, your practice pharmacist, can be really supportive and can help as well. So it might be worth just linking in with them and just see if they can give you some advice and some support.
Spot on. Thanks very much, Rebecca. Two questions that are similar. I'm going to tie them together. So both John and Joe have asked about ignoring pain or pushing through pain. So there's Joe says, with pain, I try to ignore it until I get to the point where I have to take painkillers. Is that a good idea? Is that a good strategy? And John asks, is it better to try and push through the pain barrier? So let's come to Rebecca again from a physio perspective. Is it better to just simply push through this pain, or to try and ignore it until it reaches the point where you can't ignore it anymore? What's your perspective on that?
Good questions. Generally, we don't say ignore or push through, and think of it as a battle. We tend to kind of we recognise painkillers have a place, but we also now recognise that actually long-term use is really not helpful, and actually can often make pain more sensitized, so the system becomes more sensitized. So it is trying to kind of learn new ways of thinking and managing. So from an activity management point of view, so thinking from a physio point of view, it's looking at things like pacing activities, and trying to look at or kind of using the relaxation, this distraction, the kind of where it's appropriate to use that to help to try and desensitize the system as well, in order to try and kind of return to some of the stuff that maybe you've had to stop because of pain. So it's probably not useful to think of it as a battle, but more of a way to kind of manage it. And kind of work out from it's not an easy question to answer, but if I was talking about painkillers, very often we need to explore. People are very often on painkillers that aren't helpful, but they've been taking them because they're being prescribed, and maybe they're scared of reducing them and such like. But it's kind of exploring what's helping, what's not helping, and how to better use that in the future on your pain journey.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And that's a tricky thing to do, Pearson. It's I'm in no doubt of that. Let me ask Claire and Finn about your experiences with regards to pacing versus pushing through versus trying to ignore pain, which is just feels like a difficult thing to do as well. Claire, I'll come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, pacing over or pushing, wow. For me, it really depends on the different days rather than on anything in particular. I find depends on what I was going to do. I'd love to go out and have a walk some days, and then there's some days I just want to sit on a settee and do absolutely nothing else. It really is just a case of almost day by day. If I have something in the diary for a night out with friends where I would make an excuse and end up not going out, I push myself to go. I no longer hit the dance floor as much as I would like to. I've learned that is pushing myself too far, getting out, having just a time out with friends, whatever it is just as good. Sitting on the sidelines watching them dance is actually more funny than me joining in. But being out there doing that, if I want to go out, Fen, you'll like this one, go out and dig the garden. If I just go and dig a tiny little patch in the corner, is better than not going out at all. So it really, for me, different days, different things. Fen?
Yeah, I've got to agree there. I think depending on what type of pain you deal with, I think that's a really important element as well, because for those with fibromyalgia, for those with rheumatoid or immune disorders, fatigue is a massive issue. And yes, while you're keen and you want to get fit or you want to do some activity, you do have to be careful of how much you've got in the bank, if you like, in terms of what you can actually manage. And I've done it myself. I've gone and dug the garden and think, oh right, I'll just go and weed that bit. I'll just chop the heads off those and I'll just like have a look in the fish pond, etc., etc. And then I realise that's going to be too much, because if I do that today, I know what's going to be happening tomorrow and the next day, that I'm going to be, you know, up on the sofa again for a couple of days because I've overdone it. It is a matter of balance, and it is understanding and listening to your body. Yes, there is an element of pushing through and distracting and pacing, but there is also that thing of taking care of yourself. You know, you've got to look after yourself as well. And yeah, you want to get on, I want to get better, I want to get off these drugs, I want to do this, I want to do that, but you've got to do it steady. It, like Deepak said, it's a journey, and you don't want to push yourself, that you push yourself too much and you can actually injure yourself, and then you're back to the starting point again. So just take it steady, listen to your body, and as hard as it is, just roll back a little bit too. And you know, remember, fatigue is, you know, is terrible, and it really does interfere with sleep as well, and sleep is really important. But do never ever feel guilty about having a rest and taking time out. It's absolutely fine.
Great advice, Fen. And probably just as hard as pacing is actually saying, this isn't for me today, actually, doing this task that I want to do. I'll come to Cormac, who has a little to add on pacing as well.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, on top of all those excellent answers, on our website, we've got lots and lots of resources on the Flippin Pain website. And one of the resources we point you to is the Pain Toolkit, which is run by Pete Moore. We've seen the video of Pete Moore earlier in my talk. Pete has a wonderful section on self-management and pacing, and is a really, really good resource for learning how to pace. I definitely recommend going and checking it out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cormac. A question has come in that I imagine a lot of people will relate to, and it's a question about when you feel brushed off by healthcare professionals. Maybe your tests came back normal, your scan came back normal, which, as Cormac had alluded to in the presentation, that's perfectly common when it comes to persistent pain. There may be no signs of injury or damage. Have you, I'll come to Claire and Fen again there, any tips as to what to do when you do feel perhaps dismissed by a healthcare professional? How can you communicate that with your healthcare professional, or get across that you're still suffering even though your tests, etc., are normal? Fen, do you want to go first?
Hi. It is difficult, particularly if you have a good relationship with that healthcare professional and you don't agree with them. It is a matter of having a conversation. Your health is your wealth, as everybody knows that. But it's also about your decision making. It's not entirely just the healthcare professional. And it is a matter of, you know, either agreeing to disagree and finding somebody else who will support you in what you want to do. There is always an alternative. You are always entitled to a second opinion. But it's also sometimes just reining back a bit and making space to listen to each other, because sometimes that doesn't happen, particularly if it's a 5-minute chat with your GP. I mean, I've recently been to see the new prescribing person in our practice. Now, he's unaware that I have some background knowledge, because I've been, you know, had the great help from Flippin Pain and learned a lot over the last couple of years. And he's busy there telling me that I need to be on amitriptyline and I need to be on citalopram, all these things. I go, no, I don't need to be on those. I don't really need those to help me, because I know they're going to cause me more problems. And it was a difficult conversation, but I was able to explain to him that I do have an understanding of how my own pain works. And I think the best solution for me would be to carry on with the programme that I'm already on. It was very, very uncomfortable, but it's a matter of being fair but firm sometimes. But again, also, if you really do feel that you're not getting the support that you want, then, you know, seeking a second opinion somewhere, that might be a harsh reality, but for some of us, we've had to take that step.
Thanks very much, Fen. And Claire, have you any experience of feeling that dismissal by healthcare services?
Very much. The breakdown that I mentioned earlier this year, they just basically pushed me back to physio. No offence to any physios on the call, please, I don't mean it like that. But when you've done round after round and round and round of physio, you can almost guess which moves they're going to give you. Admittedly, I went along with an open mind. As Fen said, you go with an open mind. Medical practitioners and practices change time upon time. What was routine is now not routine. What used to work has now been taken completely out of the medical books because, my God, that does more damage than it ever should have done. So I always go with half a mind of this is just a tick box, but half a mind of, hey, what's changed, what's new? You know, Flippin Pain for me 6 months ago didn't exist. Flippin Pain now is part of my toolkit to deal with this. Yeah, if you're not happy with what you've had, go back to them. I always say give it a go and then go back to them. If you can kick back straight away, you'll probably just get a closed door in your face from the medical professional you're speaking to. Because again, sorry guys, they think they know best. You think you know best. As Sven said, there will be a middle ground somewhere. You've just got to tread till you find it. But it's there somewhere. Everybody is different. One doctor will prefer this prescription. One pharmacist will kind of look at you and go, well, why have they given you that? Oh, I don't know. That's what the doctor gave me when I walked out. Roll with it. If it works for you, continue. If not, question. Fen said, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a fourth opinion. You know your body. Nobody can see inside your body. Even you can't. You just think you know what you're feeling. Roll with it.
I think you're absolutely right about finding that middle ground, because there's two experts when it comes to pain, isn't there? There's yourself, you're the expert of your pain, and then you've got the person who kind of maybe has studied the science, that healthcare professional, and there's got to be a meeting in the middle. It can't just be a dictator, you know, of a healthcare professional telling you the answers. So that always goes so fast, but that does round us up at the end of the webinar. Now, there was a question about support within the West Midlands area. There is a fibromyalgia support group which is in the Brierley Hill area, so there'll be a link just appearing in the chat if you want to find out more about that, run by a gent called Bernard. It's a fibromyalgia support group, but really for people with persistent pain in the area. So we'll put the link to that in the chat so you can find out the contact details for that. All that is left is for me to thank Cormac for his presentation. Thanks so much to my panelists as well for another great discussion, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of the evening and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye bye.